Hi, my name's Craig Calder, and I'm the founder and owner of ThinkClear Group, a leadership development and consulting business that develops expert problem-solving teams. And I'm about to be on the online prosperity show, and what you can expect is a deep dive tour into why problems aren't foes, they're actually your friends, and how they can turn your career into something spectacular and your business into something that will outshine the competition for years to come. I hope you can enjoy.
Welcome to yet another exciting episode of the Online Prosperity Show, your go-to destination for exclusive insights into the journeys of remarkable individuals. I'm your host, Prosper Taruvinga, and today we are going to be diving into the world of problem solving with a twist of creativity. Now, Craig, how are you doing, my man?
I'm fantastic, Prosper. Thanks for inviting me.
Fantastic. I'm excited for this. I mean, it's not every day you get to meet an EY partner who, turns into an artist and now is helping people solve problems. So I think we're in for a bit of a treat today, yeah?
I hope so. Let's go.
Great stuff. Now, for those that are watching right now, imagine this, a former EY partner who's now an abstract artist, author, and also the founder of the ThinkClear group. And that's Craig for you. And he's a man who's transitioned from the corporate boardrooms to art studios while just mastering art and really solving complex problems. And Craig's journey is just a testament to the power of, first of all, embracing change and pursuing one's passions. He did try to explain, but I don't believe this. He nearly failed his HSC English exam, but he's now authored a book, that solves problems. So I'm going to let him explain himself out of that one. And he's actually redefined what it means to be a problem solver in today's world. So I encourage you to grab your favorite beverage. For me, if people wouldn't look at me weird, it would have been a whiskey. So maybe yours is a coffee, a tea, or a kombucha, whatever suits your fancy, so we can explore Craig's transformative journey today. So this episode, we're going to be exploring his transition from corporate executive to creative entrepreneur, the insights behind the book ProblemHunter. And we're also going to be looking at how his experiences can actually inspire you to tackle challenges head on. Now, Craig, if you let me, I'm going to talk until the cows come home and start saying things that I'm not even qualified to talk about. Tell us a little bit about your journey, and especially the part where it starts off with you almost failing an English exam.
Well, it's quite a good story. For me, it's transformative in a lot of ways. So I went to a regular public high school and had no idea what I was going to do. I was good at maths, I was good at accounting and business, but I had absolutely no idea how to put words together in a way that was coherent and could tell a story. And so my first experience of learning how to write was not a very amazing one. I came very close to failing English as part of HSC and thought after that, you know what, I'm better at maths, I'm better at numbers and business. How about I just do that? So I went to business school in Melbourne. I went to RMIT, got a job in a small accounting and auditing practice to start with called Dewsbury's. So my first career actually was as an auditor. So I learned how to put financial statements together, learn where they would go wrong, learn how to put them back together. And so I became a chartered accountant. That was my first career as a chartered accountant. I lasted 3 years doing that and said, you know what, it's not life's dream for me. It's not what's cut out for me, I guess. So I then moved into EY, into the consulting land. And that was a lot of fun. And so my gig at EY was to help people improve the way their businesses work through better processes, better control, and so they could get better outcomes. And so I really enjoyed doing that. And it took me all around the world. I started in Melbourne, I worked in Toronto, worked in London, and ended up in Sydney where I am now, and ended up becoming a partner doing those things, which was great for a little while. And I became good at two things. I became good at spotting problems for other people. So I would get into a business and I'd be able to find out where the problems were. And the other thing I became good at, which is what they train you to do as a consultant at EY, is I became good at telling other people what they needed to do to solve their problems. So in a sense, I became good at spotting problems for other people and telling them how to fix them. But the thing that I never did, and the thing that I ended up learning about myself that I needed to fix, was I didn't learn how to or develop the skills to solve my own problems or to solve big problems for other people. So advisors are great because they can spot problems and tell others about them. But if you want to develop your career, what I learned the hard way, I guess, is you've got to do the work yourself to solve these big challenges. That's where the growth comes. That's where the resilience is developed. And that's where the creativity that we are all born with can come to life. And so after a few years as a partner at EY, I decided it was my turn to solve that and start to learn how to solve bigger problems myself. So I did a few years in corporate, and then I formed my own consulting business called ThinkClear Group. And what I attempted to do, and what my passion and purpose for that business is to develop ways in which other people can learn how to solve problems themselves. Part of my journey was to dive into consulting projects where I didn't just do the spotting of problems and telling other people about them. I actually did the work myself. So I became a consulting property developer. I was on M&A transactions. I was on post-merger integrations. I was implementing technology at different places. I was finding ways to improve different parts of the business, but doing the work myself, capture cost savings, all those sort of things where you've got to find a way to solve the problem yourself. And I guess what that taught me, Prosper, was that growth comes from doing hard things. But what I also realized, and where I got the idea of creating a book and pivoting what I do to help others become good at problem solving, is that when big changes would happen in a business, either market forces would force a change in the way things would happen, or mergers and acquisitions would come along. What I noticed about teams who are in corporate and who are doing the same job for quite a while, they struggled with what to do to solve different problems that they'd never encountered. They wanted to, but they were stuck. They were stuck doing the same things over and over, and they didn't understand, why couldn't I figure out a new problem that comes along? Why am I so scared of it? What's the fears that are overcoming me to stop taking on these problems and doing something more meaningful? And so when I observed this over and over again, what I realized was that maybe there's a bunch of people who work in jobs that they're doing over and over that could do with a bit of a hand to find and solve problems that they never have before. And is that something that we need to do more of? And that was the genesis behind the book. And what I did was I spoke to whole different kinds of people. I spoke to medical professionals, neurosurgeons, neurologists, psychologists, artists, engineers, people who had a perspective on how problems were identified and how people could solve them. And I learned two things out of that research. The first one was that the people that became really good at solving any kind of problem, not just the ones they're trained to, they master the inner game. And by that, I mean what perspective you bring to a problem, whether you think it's an obstacle or is it an opportunity? Do you think you should look for weaknesses or strengths? They mastered their perspective. So they had the widest possible aperture or lens on any problem. And so that gave them a lot of flexibility in how they approached it. Because how you perceive something, or your perspective, forms how you respond. And the second thing they were able to do is they mastered their external game, which was two things: strategy, what was the way in which they approached any problem? And a lot of people boiled it down to very simple things. And the second thing they did was they mastered some skills and kept developing those skills so they could get better at it. And the thing that they particularly focused on that helped them the most was they dealt with ambiguity, where they didn't know the answer and how could they take at least one step forward towards the outcome and then learn from there and adapt from there. So the book that I wrote, to come all the way back to this arc, is all about helping people tackle problems they've never tackled before and learn that actually problems are the best pathway to success. They're the best pathway to progress and the best pathway to a career that's more meaningful. And so the book tries to do those two things: help you with your mindset and your perspective of problems, your inner game, and it helps with the external game because it has a 3-step strategy that'll help you solve any problem, and 4 skills that those people that mastered problem solving became really good at, and how you can too.
And thank you so much for taking us through that journey, because all of this really just showcases that, you know, in life, whatever we are facing, it's either intrinsic or it's being forced on us by external forces, and it's how you respond to said problems that you can actually thrive. Now, let's just take it back a little bit, Craig. I mean, obviously, you did open us up to young Craig, who was at meme type space where you're at a crossroads and there's an arrow that says accounting or there's an arrow that says storytelling and things like that. Was that something that only you were experiencing at that time, or just all the other classmates and people around you had no clue what they wanted to be when they finished school?
Yeah, pretty much. The school I went to was a bit rough around the edges. I think half the class were either dope smokers, and the other half of the class were not. I think even my high school English teacher was fond of the green stuff as well. So I wasn't sure I had the best learning environment to work with, but nonetheless, there was at least half of us that I was at school with that actually wanted to do something with a career, and so I saw education as a ticket out, and so I tried my best to get a start, and it was to find a university where I could get a trade or get a skill that, you know, would give me a step till I could figure out what it was that I really wanted to do. And in fact, it wasn't my ambition to go to business school to start with. Back in when I was at high school, it was in year 9, I think. You had to make choices around what kind of subjects you did. And I remember at the time I really loved art. Art was probably my passion way back then. And I remember talking to my dad at the time, and I said, hey, I've got to make choices. I can't do art and business because they just won't fit in within the schedule. I either do maths, business, economics, or I do the artistic stuff. And I said to my dad, well, what choice do I make? How do I make this decision? He goes, son, you're never going to make any money as an artist. Go do business first, and if you really want to do something else, you can do it later. And so the choice I took was, right, well, I actually want to earn some money, so I better go do business first. But art was always in the background. And as I developed my career and I got to a point where I needed to expand my problem-solving skills, art was the vehicle to do that, because art really is just solving a creative problem. And some of the I think the most amazing problem-solving minds out there are actually artists.
Yep.
In fact, one of the most well-used and probably the most universal problem-solving technique is used by artists a lot, and it's called inversion, where you choose to look at something from the opposite perspective. A great example is Andy Warhol. So Andy Warhol's pop artist back in the 60s and 70s, and he created a bunch of prints of Marilyn Monroe. You might be familiar with them. Yep. They were screen prints of Marilyn Monroe. In fact, one of them sold for 175 million US 3 years ago. The most expensive piece of pop art ever sold. Now, back when he was creating these prints, he created a series of 10 prints and he made 25 of each. And he sold them all for something like £2,000 or something. And about 8 years later, he's going, well, I need to make some more money. How do I do that? And he looked at his screen prints of Marilyn and he said, they were the best sellers I've ever made, better than his Campbell soup products or other pop art that he did. He said, what if I did the opposite? wherever there's light, maybe I'll make it dark. Where there's color, I'll do the reverse color. Like, you have a negative, the old negative for a film,
Yeah. Yes,
the
absolutely. Yeah.
reverse. And so he did that, and he created a series, what he called reversals, which were the same image, but just the exact opposite color. So where there was light, he put dark, etc. He did same 10 kind of prints, 25 of each, and he sold them for double the price than what he sold his originals for. So doing the opposite is one of the most universal problem-solving techniques around, and it's used by artists all the time.
Absolutely. Well, you're talking about, and thank you so much for that piece of information because an insight, because it really showcases to us how other people also perceive what we're seeing. Because if you inverse it, some people are seeing it from a different angle. Like if there's a sign or a signal like this, looking like that is a whole different way of viewing it and the like. And that also comes down to how Steve Jobs also viewed the Apple symbol at the back of a laptop. He wanted that if you opened the laptop, the person who is on across you will see the Apple upright because you've already been sold, so you don't need to be seeing the logo upright. And that actually, they say, attributed to a lot more people buying more of the product than they were doing before. And it's just seeing things in a whole different way and being empathetic to how other people would view it. So that's such a really good insight, especially for people that are in business. And I think you've actually solved half of the world's problems right there alone, because so many people are seeing things from their own vantage point, not seeing it from how other people can perceive it and things like that. So we could just end this podcast.
Absolutely.
Here,
It's like,
right?
it's the old glass half full, glass half empty. It's the same thing. Exactly the same thing. You're looking at it from a different perspective. Another really good example of inversion is what Elon Musk did with SpaceX. So when he was developing that business, he said, right, we need a cheaper way to send satellites up into space because it costs about between 100 and 300 million to send a single-use rocket up into the atmosphere to launch a bunch of satellites. And said that is way too expensive to keep doing. So he said, what if we did the opposite? What if we had a reusable rocket, one that went up and then came back down? What would that cost? Well, as it turns out, that saves about 30 to 40% of the cost of putting a rocket up into space. And each time that reusable rocket comes back down, they can reuse it 10 times. And the refurbishment cost is only a few million bucks. So over 10 launches, SpaceX has a much, much cheaper way of getting satellites into space. So he just did the opposite of what everyone else did. He said, well, everyone uses a single-use rocket. What if we had a multi-use reusable rocket? What would that do? That idea was the genesis behind their reusable rocket strategy.
Absolutely. And I quite like how, obviously, the way they're doing it, they've already started space tourism, and in light of recent events, whether people like it or not, but that was just a showcase of how far we've come, especially with that sort of technology, knowing that people that have no expertise, just in case the thing stops mid-air, they don't know, maybe there's a button to push, or there's it's something that they can fix in order for them to be able to come back home. Now, your work took you to different places, and it's very important, especially when it comes to problem solving, because you were in Melbourne at some point. Obviously, it's a whole different world. Even if you're in Sydney right now, it's a whole different world. For those that are outside of the country, they would just think you're still in the same country. But when you go over there, it's new set of rules, new driver's license, and a whole set of way of living. And then you also did Toronto and all these other places. Did this moving around also enhance your way of viewing the world in such a way that, because wherever you go, you are by definition a rookie, and you have to, figuratively start afresh, which means you have to be solving some problems along the way?
Yeah, you're right. I had to have a beginner's mindset everywhere I went. So, and your driver's license example is a good one. So moving from Melbourne to Toronto, different side of the road. I couldn't use my driver's license. I had to go back to square one and get a new one, which meant doing driver's tests, both written and on the road. So everything had to be learnt again, even a way of living. So Toronto is full of snow. They said there's only two seasons in Canada, hockey and construction. And construction is in summer, and that's a very short window of time. And so even just basics of living when you're in a completely different environment, you had to adopt that beginner's mindset. Everything had to be learnt again. And I guess because I moved so often, that beginner's mindset sort of crept in as to what I ended up doing with work as well. Every time I was faced with something new, right, beginner's mindset, let's go back to first principles. What can I learn here? What do I need to learn? And how do I do it fast?
I like that, because so many people, like we were just talking, I'm in Melbourne. So many people have never left Victoria. And so they wouldn't know that there's a whole different world outside of their world because they've never had to experience it. And for some people, they wouldn't be able to then solve even the seemingly smallest problems because it's never occurred in their own space. So we are now facing a situation where so many people are qualified for a world that no longer exists. And it's because they've never been able to move around enough for them to be able to see a whole different way of living and things like that. And we'll touch up on that a little bit later. So you went on and started doing the problem solving part with EY, which basically what every entrepreneur is taught from whatever bush school that they would have learned. Solve a problem. And when you can solve a problem, make sure you're helping other people, get solutions to whatever problems and things of that nature. And what were your findings, especially with the people that you were working with? Was that an easy concept for them to grasp, or were they just adding more problems to the problems that they already have?
Well, what I observed most was that people approach different problems based on their own expertise. So, for example, if you're in marketing, you approach any problem as if it's a marketing problem. If you're in finance, you approach any problems like it's a finance problem. I need data. I need to analyze it. It needs to be perfectly understood in order for me to move forward. So if you're in a function within a business, what I observed was that your default way of looking at problems is the training that you fall back on. And so breaking out of your training and breaking out of the ways that you look at things really opens up your ability to see things differently, which means that you have a much greater range of potential solutions and ideas that you can then deploy. So that was the one thing that I really noticed. People approach problems based on their level of training and their innate experience that they've gathered. So marketing people see every problem as a marketing problem. So do finance people. They see it all as a finance problem. They can't really see other beyond it. And I was a finance person for a long time, so I saw problems as things that needed to be fixed immediately and to be perfect before you had to move forward. Whereas entrepreneurs, they don't see it that way. They see problems as potential, and you don't have to have a perfect solution. What you really need is momentum. And when you create momentum, no matter what happens, if you like a pinball moving around a pinball machine, you'll bash into something and then you move to something else. You just keep going.
You see, I liked the other part that you mentioned. So many people have internalized certain solutions so much that it becomes repetitive and they become very proficient in that particular set of skills. You know what I mean? There's usually steps to doing something, or there's a concept around certain things. Like you were saying, some people see problems based on their own training. So half of the time, a lot of people memorize the steps, so that they have a direct and simple path to obtain whatever results that they're always looking for until the world changes. And we all notice that changing in the last 5 years. Even if it's not that dramatic of a change, but even the tiniest shift in the system will literally start taking people out of their learned expertise and stuff like that. And you did mention people that have internalized and have a full concept of what it is that they're doing makes life a whole lot easier. Maybe you can expand on that a little bit, and maybe so that people can actually understand, because so many people want to be competent enough just so that they're doing something, whereas if that particular thing changes, they no longer know how to work. Because if you look at where we are right now, so many people are really, really afraid of AI, but it can actually be there to enhance whatever it is that they've been doing.
That's a great point. I think there's two things I can bring to this. The first one is that Harvard researchers Robert Keegan and Lisa Leahy, they're adult development experts, and what they found was that the leading cause of burnout isn't overwork in a business. This isn't working long hours all the time. It's actually going too long without development. So what they found was that if we go for about 2 years doing the same thing in a role, where we're not experiencing significant growth or development of new skills or experiences, what happens is that learning part of our brain suddenly starts to shut off. We create habits, we create routines that are comfortable, and we slot very quickly into our comfort zone because it feels good to be able to do things, right? That we know how to do. We feel great about ourselves. But the problem with that is if you stay in your comfort zone for about 2 years, that learning part of your brain starts to switch off. It's kind of like, imagine you stop running, you stop exercising completely for a couple of years. You're just, wandering around. At night, you sit on the sofa eating a pack of chips and you think this is great. But then 2 years later, all of a sudden you need to start running places. You need to start using your muscles. Well, guess what? If you haven't used them, you haven't developed them, and you haven't maintained them, it's actually really hard to get fit again. It's the same with our mind. Unless you keep your mind active with new problems and finding out new ways of doing things and developing, it becomes hard when we're faced with the necessity to change when it comes. Because just like our muscles, our mind needs to be exercised in order to stay mentally fit. That's the first thing. So if you feel like you're in the comfort zone, certainly for 2 years doing the same thing, it's time to get out. And finding a problem is a great way to get out. The second thing I can bring to this is that fears naturally cause us to take a flight to safety. And in any kind of innovation, in any kind of development work or problem solving in a business, there's three core fears that people have in their mind that they're always scanning to see whether it's safe to take a risk and innovate. And those three fears are the fear of criticism, the fear of losing control of something you start and not being able to see the end. And the third is the fear of a career impact. So if it doesn't go well, what does that mean for you? And so if we spend too long in our comfort zone and we don't feel the environment we're working in will help us manage those fears of criticism, of control, and career impact, they're kind of like amplifiers to keep us stuck in that spot. And so it becomes difficult to move out. And when fear is prevalent in our mind for a long period of time, what it does is it shuts down our curiosity, it shuts down our creativity. And that's what we really need to solve new problems and develop new skills. And it's not a voluntary thing. It's actually a biological reaction. There are two parts of our brain that we use for creativity and curiosity. One is our prefrontal cortex, which is the creative problem-solving part of our brain. And the other part is the default mode network, which is the part of our brain that creates new connections. It forms new learning patterns, and it helps us create ideas that then can help us solve a problem. Those two parts of our brain shut down when we feel fear, and we feel fear for a long time. So it's those three fears of criticism, lack of control, and career impact. If they stay with us, it basically shuts down our ability to learn, and it makes it much harder for us to motivate ourselves to go through the learning zone that we need to develop new skills, new solutions to problems, and do what's really important for careers, which is take initiative.
Now, obviously, you wrote about this in your book, The Problem Hunter, and the way that you're narrating this psychology of fear. Because if you understand that if you open the door, whatever is behind there, yes, you might have seconds of frantic, trying to deal with it. But if you walk past that, there's a whole lot out there. But the society we live in, Craig, has created so many safety nets, which people are now using as hammocks. And it makes it easy for people to just really stay put. You know what I mean? There's an insurance company for everything. There's an app for everything. You'll get hungry. There's an Uber Eats for everything. So it makes it very difficult for people to really step outside their comfort zone. Do you have a solution to that? Because that's a problem.
And it is a massive problem. We've created a society which says feeling frustration, feeling any kind of anxiety is actually bad. And so there's so many solutions that are saying, look, find your way to come back to comfort. Comfort is our natural default. When actually, comfort is a great rest stop, but it's not a permanent destination. And so where you feel comfort, enjoy it while it lasts, but don't expect to stay there forever. Because if you do, you will get left behind. Because if you're not growing, you're not developing new skills, you're not trying new things, then you will start to suffer from a career point of view, but you also start to suffer from a life point of view. If you don't exercise, which means that you're going to be pushing yourself and developing, you get unfit. And if you're unfit, you become unhealthy, and it puts you at risk of not having the life that you want to lead that's healthy. The same thing goes for your mind. If you don't find new problems, you don't develop new skills, which means you go through the learning zone, which is frustrating at times. And if you don't learn to cope with that frustration, then you will stay stuck. And it's almost like trading off, do I feel safe and comfortable now, but then take a much bigger pain later on when I'm left without a job, without new skills that can help me compete and prosper in this new generation of AI and changes in the way that work is going to work? Or do I take a little bit of discomfort now? Do I take some initiative to learn about it, to find a problem that I could use to perhaps explore and have a look at AI and see how it can work, and maybe I can bring some of those ideas to the workplace, and what would that do? So it's almost like you choose your pain. Comfort now, bigger pain later, or a little bit of discomfort now and much greater opportunity for gain later.
If you really look at this if you really look at these three fears, Craig, you literally experienced them, especially at the pivotal moment where you had to ask your father or your dad to help you with a decision. Okay. First of all, the criticism, you did not want to be criticized for making the wrong decision or ending up in a career that didn't maybe suit where you were at that particular point. And control, you wanted to make sure that the outcome that was going to come out of that, you were going to be able to, first of all, control your life and also control your earnings based on the fact that you were told art was one of those things that wouldn't pay you in the way that you would have wanted, unless you did that reverse thing you're talking about with Marilyn Monroe. And the last bit was career impact. Obviously, the people back in that time didn't know what other prospects you could get, especially if you studied and pursued art and things of that nature. Now, would you say that Problem Hunter is just a bunch of your own problems that you're trying to solve?
You're actually right. I wrote the book in part as a way to solve my own problem and bring that solution to other people. I was trained as a finance person, so I saw problems from a very specific perspective. That was, where were they? They were holes in the ground you either needed to fill, or there were obstacles you needed to get out of the way. And I was trained in finance so that numbers needed to stack up. They needed to be perfect. So to move forward, I needed to figure out a way in which I could get the perfect numbers, rather than say, well, are these numbers good enough for us to be directionally accurate rather than perfect. So in a way, I had to stumble on my own shortcomings and my own perspective limitations in order for me to then go, okay, well, how do I shift this? And how can I help others shift that too? So in a way, the book I wrote was one that I wished I'd read when I was 20 years old, which would then have helped my career and the way I chose to make certain decisions and live the life that I did. And I would have lived it a little bit different.
Absolutely. And I quite like that. So in a way, obviously, now that you had figured it all out, I mean, found.
I wouldn't say that. I wouldn't say that. I'm on a different path to figuring it out. Yeah.
Absolutely. Now, you went on and started your own business, the ThinkClear group and things of that nature. First of all, what was it like transitioning from, obviously you were in a corporate gig, everything just seemed a-okay, and I'm supposing all these clients that you're talking about, the people that you had to solve problems for, there was some department that was making sure that the clients were there. You would just step in as a partner, as a consultant, and just deal with that. Whereas ThinkClear, you literally had to show up by yourself and be the one that puts the staples into your own staple gun.
Exactly. It was going from an environment where you would lead large teams of people with enormous support groups around you. You had a global network to ask peers questions to get answers. So you had this incredible environment where you could be really, really efficient in the way that you approach things and make sure that you brought the best of the thinking and experience at that time to clients, which was amazing. So when I stepped out of that environment, all of a sudden, all of that tap turned off, and it was just my own head and my own wits that I could use. And so everything you had to do, which again was humbling. It was equal parts terrifying, equal parts exciting, but it developed that part of my mind and developed that part of my, I guess, experience and resilience to help me get the confidence that no matter what problem was going to be thrown at me, with learning again from the ground up, I could do it. And so it was humbling. At times it was frustrating, but looking back, it was some of the best experiences that I've ever had.
Absolutely. Now that you've created ThinkClear Group, what are some of the core principles behind the methodology that you're using for your customers now?
So the business does three things. It's a leadership development business, so it helps train leaders and teams to become expert problem hunters and problem solvers so that they can accelerate the development of their business and the careers within their business further. It's a research business, so I look at ways in which I can get expertise from others, decode it, mix it with others, and share it so that people can learn the art, the science, and the methods of problem solving so they can become better at what they want to do. And the third thing that we do is that we do provide consulting. So where a company has really big challenges and they want people to facilitate sessions, they want strategies on how they could approach them, we do that too. And so the business is really a mix of learning, it's research, and it's consulting and supporting. And what we do is we create simple ways people can approach complex problems so that that makes them much more manageable, much more understandable. And we help them tackle the big fears that often stand in the way of people being successful. And one of them in particular is around how you manage those three fears of criticism, lack of control, and career impact. And what the research shows is that if you don't manage those fears well within a team, and particularly also within a business, if it's a systemic cultural issue, it is very clear that over time that will lead to underperformance. So, for example, where you've got a company that has expert problem-solving capability and they manage those fears well, they outperform their peers by over 6 times over a 3-year period. Another example is if you're a private company, you develop a leadership team that are really good at solving problems together without the input of the owner, they get about a 50% multiple boost on sale. So instead of a 4 times multiple of earnings, you get a 6 times multiple. Why? Because the private equity people buying they know that that team that's left in place after the founder leaves, they are resilient and resourceful and capable enough to find and solve the problems that matter, that will continue to make that business grow and support its development and profits. And they don't need to take the risk that they won't, or find and develop other people that will. So it's a really deeply profitable and valuable skill set to have. And what we do is help manage the fears that can get in the way. And they create a thing called what we call the initiative gap, where leaders want people to take initiative to find and solve problems and create innovations that drive the business forward. But unless you manage those three fears, it forces people into safety of their comfort zone. And the longer you spend there, the less able you are to find and solve the problems that matter when you need to. And so what we do is we help teams find those fears and manage them at a systemic level so that they can create amazingly capable teams that really want to find problems, and they get joy and satisfaction out of solving them. And there was a great survey that Seth Godin did when a couple of years ago. He surveyed 10,000 people, 90 different countries, and he asked them, tell me about the best job you ever had. And he said what came back was that the best jobs that people said they ever had was where they worked on something that they never thought they could solve. They were able to work a little bit autonomously, and they did something really meaningful. So in other words, they worked on problems that were big, that were meaningful, and they developed something out of it. And interestingly, in this survey, people could have said, best jobs was where I got paid a lot of money, laid in my hammock, and didn't have to do anything. But they didn't. Why? Most satisfaction and the most engagement in teams come from when you do meaningful things and you add some value. And that comes from solving problems.
Absolutely. And in the light of Seth Godin, he does have a statement that I absolutely love. He says, do work that matters for people who care. And especially I think it just rings true to this, because so many people think, there's that whole concept of a laptop lifestyle where you wake up drinking some sort of cocktail, looking at your novel and sitting at the beach. But that life only exists in deceptive Facebook ads. It doesn't quite exist. Now, you seemingly are creating problem hunters, in the workplace. What are the unique qualities for somebody to make an effective problem hunter? Because so many people, like you said, are just really relegated to their comfort zone. And there's this whole thing, I think I came across it in Australia, where people just say, oh, she'll be all right, mate. We've always done things like this around here. But yeah, you're sort of really helping people and teams to shift from just passive execution to proactive innovation. Now, how can a leader start sporting somebody who's an effective problem hunter?
There's three things that we share with leaders that they can do. The first one is to embrace and encourage curiosity, because curiosity is the door that opens new ideas, and it creates energy and enthusiasm to try and do things that will make a business or make a career better. And so encouraging curiosity is something we always teach people how to do. So a great way to do that is whenever you're looking at an opportunity, a decision, or an issue, instead of just looking at the pros and cons, so you look at what's good or bad, what that does is it uses the judgment part of your brain, which is binary. It's a yes or a no, or it's good or it's bad. Instead of just doing pluses and minuses, ask what's interesting. Because when you ask an open question of your mind, it has to think about what the answer is. And when you ask what's interesting about something, it then spurs curiosity. A great example is, Heston Blumenthal, the celebrity chef who matched or blended science with food to create molecular gastronomy. And one of the most creative chefs that were around. He would constantly ask his team, what are you working on is interesting? Is anyone else thinking about that? What is interesting about that thing that you're looking at? So he promoted a culture where everyone was curious about everything, and working on something interesting was the best thing that you could say you were doing. And why did he do that? Because curiosity then led to ideas, which then they could explore and create innovation out of. So first step for any leader, or even if you're in a team and you want to move out of a comfort zone, turn on your curiosity. Look at something from a beginner's mindset and say, well, why is that? What's interesting about that? Because when you turn on curiosity, your brain starts to want to think about new ideas. The second thing the second strategy we teach organizations is to make it easy for people to want to create ideas and take action to explore them. And by that, I mean you reduce the friction to doing it. So a good example is where a business creates some time for people to explore ways in which they could make things more productive or use technology that's coming in that could be applied in the workplace. AI is a fantastic example. If companies aren't allowing their workforce to at least explore what that technology could do, then they're missing out on creating whole groups of people who will be interested and ahead of the game when they come to apply it. So an example of this is a company called Gore and Associates. They're the ones that, Gore-Tex, that fabric that's waterproof, that goes into all outerwear, right? They created that. So there's a story from them about 20 years ago. They were creating the cables that went into Disney animatronics. So they were the mannequins that moved around, with pulleys at the time. And what they were finding is that the strings that they were using to move these mannequins around, there was friction in them. And so they said, well, how do we fix that? And so at the time, they had this polymer-based product they could coat these strings with that when they pulled them, made the flow of these animatronics much more fluid, which was a better outcome. And so Gore and Associates had this concept called dabble time, where they allowed their engineers, they allowed anyone in the business to just explore ideas that they saw that were using products or using ideas that were in the business to see whether it could create something useful. Anyway, one of the engineers that was working on these animatronics, he was a guitar player. And so he saw the cables that they were using and said, hey, they're kind of like guitar strings. And that polymer coating we're putting on it, I wonder if that makes the life of guitar strings extend or makes it sound better. And so he started experimenting and he created a set of guitar strings using this polymer that what he found was that they allowed the guitar strings to stay in tune longer than anything else on the market. And he said, that sounds interesting. So anyway, to cut a long story short, they created a brand of guitar strings called Elixir using that proprietary polymer product that is now one of the best-selling guitar strings in the world.
Wow.
So the second thing we teach businesses and teach leaders about is make it easy for people to have ideas and explore them. Because when they do that, you're always switching on the part of your brain that's looking to take an idea through the learning zone, through the frustrations of doing something and coming out the other side. And the third thing we teach is make it normal. So having an idea and exploring it or finding a problem and taking it through to solution is actually part of the way that business runs. And I'll give you a good example. There's a company called Next Jump, which is a leadership development business. And when anyone joins that business, they go on a boot camp for a couple of weeks where they learn about the values of the business, how it works, where their role fits in, and those sort of things. Now, for people to graduate from the boot camp, they've got to find a problem and create a solution that hasn't existed before. And so they create teams of people to do it, and they teach them problem-solving strategies that they can deploy. But the point being that from the very beginning of a new person's career in their business, they learn that finding and solving problems is something really important that they should be continuing to do. They normalize it. Another great example is, Pixar, the movie business that creates all those animated movies. What they learned through their early phase of development is that every movie goes through a period of time where it sucks. And, a director is really passionate about creating something beautiful and artistic, But what they learned was that in any movie, every director gets lost. They get too close to it and they can't see the problems with the character development or the script. And so they need some help to see where those problems are. So they created this process whereby at a point in every movie, the director was called in and there was a group of peers, either current directors or storytellers, people who have been through the movie making process, and they would have a feedback session where people who were independent of the movie would have a look at what was done, how the story was developing, and they would give their feedback. Now, for anyone who's developed something so unique and so creative as a movie, it's hard not to separate you from the movie, you from your product. So it can kind of feel a little bit like you're getting a whole pile of criticism. But what they did was to avoid that fear. They said, look, every director and every movie goes through a hole where there are problems that you can't see. Having others look at it who are experts in that area helps you to create the best movie. And the other thing they did to remove the risk, the fear of control being slipped away, is they said that this feedback group, they didn't have any power or authority over the movie. They just gave their thoughts. And so the director had the choice of what to do with the feedback, whether to take it on board or to ignore it. It's their choice. So the fear of control was reduced. And because every director of every movie in Pixar would go through the same process, the risk of them feeling like their career would be over if they asked for one of these sessions, these feedback sessions, went away because everyone went through it. It was normal. It was normal to feel that you were too close to the movie and you couldn't see the problems with the character development or the plot or whatever. And so it normalized it. And so what that did was it created this culture whereby directors would ask for these feedback sessions because they knew that it would help them identify problems they couldn't see, that they were blind to, and they would get help from people that they could choose then what their response would be. And it helped them improve every movie out of sight. And I think Pixar has had 15 movies in the top 50 in the world. Like, they're incredibly successful, creative, innovative movie making business. And part of that culture was built on having these feedback sessions.
Absolutely. And I quite like that because fish don't see the water that they swim in, and neither can we see the air that we breathe. And so many people are just going about life, not really looking at their blind side, and having somebody, poke holes in the work that you have done will literally help you innovate and actually solve some problems that would have maybe be actual career ending had they been left, going unchecked. Now, if somebody's watching this right now, and I also encourage the listeners, if you've ever faced a challenge that seemed insurmountable, can you share your experiences in the comments below, and let's create a community of problem hunters that are actually supporting each other. And obviously Craig will be helping you look at that. And for those that are intrigued in the kind of work that you're doing and things of that nature, where on the internet can they go to maybe solve their problems?
Well, the best place to go is my website, which is www.thinkcleargroup.com. At the moment, people can download a free copy of the book. It's available as a free download. It's available on Amazon if people want to have a hard copy. I'm someone who loves the hard copies of books and I write all over them, but a lot of people like the digital version. And that's available at the moment for free if you want to check it out. And there's a bunch of research, there's a bunch of articles, there's a bunch of blog posts that I've created that people can have a look at and see if it inspires them to want to start finding problems and solving them. Because I think where we are right now with the convergence of trade wars, with geopolitical tensions, with the adoption of AI, and it's coming rapidly fast, careers that we have now won't be the careers we have in 5 years' time. In fact, I don't know if you know this, but the CEO of of Shopify, the online e-commerce platform, he came out earlier this year and said, I I will not approve any hiring of new people until you can tell me that AI can't do the job anywhere. So the use of AI is going to be pervasive. And it's happening sooner than we think. The CEO of Salesforce came out earlier this year and he said, we will be the last generation of people to manage only humans, meaning that we'll be managing bots as well as humans as an interactive combination of the way things get done in a business. So it is happening faster than we think. And so all of this new technology is really just potential solutions to problems that we have. So looking at it that way, I think it takes away all of the mystery of what AI is and just look at it as a potential solution to problems that already exist. And if you can look at a business as just a series of problems that need solutions, you can then find AI as a way to do that. And so that's the way I look at it, and it makes it much more simple to look at AI as just a resource and a tool and a solution to problems that already exist.
Absolutely. And thank you so much for obviously clarifying that. I mean, we've been here at this point in the past, okay? When the Industrial Revolution was taking over, from the Agricultural Revolution, when cars were taking over from horses, when computers were taking over from typewriters or people with those quills, you didn't know those people that used to be with a feather and things like that. So we've been here before. Anybody who finds themselves not ready for this kind of change really should look in the past instead of trying to, blame the future, which is just being what it's supposed to be. But there's a statement that you said earlier on, Craig, and you said you wrote a book that you wish you would have read in your early 20s. Now that you know what you know about life, places you've been, problems you've solved, and you keep hunting for more, what sort of advice would you then give that young Craig who didn't know whether he should continue with accounting or he should pick up a brush and become the next Picasso?
I would say there's never an either or situation. You can always look for a win-win. I looked at life through binary choices. Do one thing or do the other. Do art, do business. But actually what I've learned is that you can actually do multiple things at once. So now I create art as a profession. I teach people the art and the science of problem solving so that they can have better careers and better businesses. And I also help people and leaders within businesses solve some of their more difficult challenges. So I can do multiple things at once. And really, it just takes a bit of passion, a bit of focus, and a whole pile of belief that no matter what problem is out there, with the right mindset, the right perspective, and a little bit of the right skills, you can actually work your way through and solve it.
I like that, and the one thing that I learned about this, no matter who you are, no matter where you come from, if you just apply yourself, which is what you did, not only will you one day have a good story to tell on the Online Prosperity Show, but, you could be able to write a book, share your journey, and still be able to do things that you're passionate about. Now, you've drawn us into your world, Craig, where I think I'm an official problem hunter by now. But what's next for either yourself or the ThinkClear group in the realm of leadership development? What can we be excited about next that you have solved for?
So the business I've got at the moment is going to continue to grow, trying to help scale the business I've got to solve more challenges for companies where they want to help people get better at solving their own problems. So the scaling up of what I do is the next opportunity for me, and that will be partly bringing in new people, and it will be partly looking at digital ways in which we can do what it is we do. We've kept it very in-person to begin with because it's a very personal skill set, solving problems. I haven't found a way yet to digitize it and get the same outcome. But in order to reach more people, we need to find a solution for that. And I think AI could be part of that. So that's the next thing that we'll be looking at. But there is a new passion project that I've just kicked off that is a really big problem that I see, that I think I can see ways in which we can approach it differently. So my son turns 16 next year. He's on the path to become from a teen to an adult. And I'm very interested in how he navigates that path from teenager to what I'm calling an authentic masculine man. And I want to create a way in which he can do that and make really good choices and create really good values that will serve him well into the future. And so I'm now onto my third book that I'll be writing, which is about how you help teens with that journey. And just this morning, I was talking to an amazing guy who is a sexologist. And what he does is he helps boys turn from porn into purposeful, creative, masculine men that don't just see that as the only form of intimacy. They see a very different form of intimacy, which is creating connections, loving connections with a partner. And so I'm having conversations with amazing people who are looking at this problem of how do you raise amazing teens in a world where they're bombarded with polarizing images of what masculinity is. How do we create a path that they can choose to take themselves, make clever choices, but are also guided along that journey so that if they start to wobble a little, it'll bring them back. So that's my next passion project, to write a book for my son's 16th birthday, which is in February next year. So it should be out by the end of the year, to help with that journey. I look forward to sharing it.
Absolutely. Well, that's yet another problem that you've solved, and yet another thing that you've solved in my head, which means for every level, there's a devil that comes along with it. You didn't know you had this problem up until your son turned 16, and now that's a problem that you got to solve. So most problems that we end up having to solve don't necessarily show up, in a package saying, here, I'm a problem, solve me. It's things that are right in front of you. And if you do a lot of digging and looking around, you will become a problem hunter. But did you realize while you were doing that, you actually committed the ultimate crime on the Online Prosperity Show?
No, that's a problem I didn't see. Tell me.
Well, you did not say you're writing a book and not pledge to come and launch it also on the Online Prosperity Show. So fix that.
I would be delighted to. I would be delighted to.
Absolutely. Thank you. Thank you so much, Craig. I mean, your life story and your experience and what it is that you're doing, not only for yourself, but also for your loved ones, is a true testament to that. The path of success often just involves embracing change and also facing challenges head on. And you have literally become an expert in that. And I don't know, you did mention you are going to be looking for champions for your cause. If you would look closely, I'm a problem hunter now. So if ever you're going to be hiring, I've got my notes. I'm ready to go. So thank you so much for your time on the show today, my man.
You're very welcome. This has been amazing. Thank you.
Absolutely. Now, for those that are watching right now, don't miss our next episode where we're going to be discussing ideas to enhance your well-being and happiness. And while you're at it, don't forget to subscribe to the Online Prosperity Show for more episodes like this. So if you're ready to become a problem hunter, well, I've already set my journey and I'm on my way. Visit ThinkClear group. I'll be putting all the links in the show notes below, so you can learn a little bit more about Craig's work and how you can actually start transforming challenges into opportunities. And as Craig said, you can also download the free copy of his book, Problem Hunter, so that you can literally get started on your journey. So I encourage you to stay curious, stay inspired, and keep hunting for those problems that are worth solving. Until next time, bye for now.